climate research division at WMO and look after
Sí. acá. ¿Tenés la papelera de la mano?
Ready? Ready?
Vos decime cuando estés lista y ahí ya lo presento. How to work with a PDF? Like, I want one screen.
For the screen?
Okay, are we ready to begin? Okay, so welcome to the Green Finance for Sustainability session. This panel will discuss the importance of moving toward blue-green portfolio that promotes sustainable investments and technologies to mitigate climate change in a sustainable and measurable way. So I'll be introducing the panelists that are going to be here. Dale Gavin. Okay, we are going to have Dale Gavin, Jessica Lopez, Natalie Hilmy, Paul Holtus, and Reem Ashid. Thank you very much for being here. I will be making a quick introduction of each of you. Thank you very much for being here. Paul Holtus. Paul founded the World Ocean Council, the International Business Leadership Alliance on Ocean Sustainable Development and Blue Economy to bring together ocean investors, innovators, and industries together for ocean leadership, collaboration, and action. The WOC convenes the monthly Ocean Investor Refundable, an annual Global Blue Finance Summit, the Ocean Investment Community, the only high-level global ocean sustainability investment event. Congratulations for that, Paul. So, Jessica Lopez, since April of this year, she became the first woman to chair Banco Estado. Banco Estado is from Chile, okay? So congratulations, Jessica, for that. A gender iconic movement there. The only public bank in Chile and the most important in the country, with more than 16 million customers and the importance of social profile. She has worked at Banco Estado for 24 years, obtaining the position of risk manager, controller, vice president, and general manager. Good for you. Reem Ashid, thank you, Reem, for being here. Ayadi. Sorry, Reem Ayadi. Okay, thank you, Reem, for being here. So Professor Reem Ayadi is founder and president of the Euro-Mediterranean Economist Association, a Barcelona-based regional think tank, serves as a leading independent and innovating policy research institution. She is professor at the Bayes Business School of City University of London, senior advisor at the Center for European Policy Studies, and associated scholar at the Center for Relationship Banking and Economics at the University of Rome. Thank you for being here. Rumza. Okay. Natalie Hilmy, thank you, Natalie, for being here. Great to have you. Dr. Natalie Hilmy is an expert in macroeconomics and international finance. After doing research and giving lectures for many years, she's now operating, I mean, you have so much PhDs on your way. I congratulate you on that. So she's the leading author as well of the IPCC, the special report on green and on ocean and cryosphere in a changing climate. It's in the chapter 5 on changing ocean, marine ecosystem and independent communities. At the also cross chapter box or as well. You've written so many papers. Thank you for being here, and currently, of course, work for the Centre Scientifique de Monaco. Dale a CEO, a CEO of Deliberated Capital. Dale Galvin is founder and fund manager of one of the first impact funds focused on oceans, the Malloy Fund, and has now joined Pegasus Capital to manage the Global Fund for Coral Reefs, the largest blended finance initiative to fund climate adaptation on behalf of coastal ecosystems and coral reefs in the global south. So Dale, thank you also for being here. It's a pleasure for all, and Dale, you're going to have the floor first. I will share you this microphone, just in case. I will share this microphone with you. Better try this one first. Yeah? No, okay, no, it's not working. This one? Oh no, she does it for you.
My neighbor pointed out that there are no coral reefs in Chile, but I want you to think about coral reefs as an indicator of ocean health, not the only part of the ocean that's worth saving, not the only part of the ocean that has something to do with climate resilience and adaptation. So here in COP, I've been thinking about, one of the biggest topics here is this idea of reparations for developing countries for a couple of costs they incur. Two of them, I think I talked about a lot, and one of them a little bit less so. So one is the cost of the transition to a green economy, what you have to sacrifice to get to net zero, how much will that cost you? Some of those revenues are investable, some aren't. The second cost is the costs that are incurred we see in the news all the time, floods, climate weather events that are devastating in terms of property and people. But then the third one is adaptation. How does a community in a coastal environment learn to live with the inevitable rising ocean temperatures that we're seeing now? And that's adaptation. And as you can see here on the slide, this is public money. It's a little bit old, but I think it still holds. The ratio of money into adaptation lags far behind mitigation. So obviously a lot of investment into renewable energy and eliminating fossil fuels, but on the adaptation side, very little. And on the investment side, even less. I don't have to slide for that, but almost nothing on the investment side that deals with adaptation. But adaptation is a particularly important way. Clean oceans. So these are the Sustainable Development Goals and the amount of investment in each one. You can see here SDG 14, life below water, is by far the least invested of all the SDGs. And just go to the next slide when you can. So, if you can see this graph, there you go. So, from an adaptation point of view, oceans are really critical, and especially the part of the ocean that we might call territorial seas or coastal waters. So these are the waters 10 to 12 miles from the shore. And the part of the ocean is coastal. This is, look at what's there. You have all of the mangroves and grasslands. You have 90% of livelihoods coming from the fishing sector. You have 80% of all coral, and so on. So this is a very important part of the ocean that historically has had almost no investment, and in most places in emerging markets, no management of the natural resource. So, as I mentioned, this is a little more stats for you. The coastal part of the oceans provides half of those fish catch, jobs for, I guess, 90% of coastal communities, food for 1 billion people, and harbor of the biodiversity, prevention of storm surges, nurseries, fisheries, and so on. Completely neglected, almost no investment. So that's why we started the Global Fund for Coral Reefs. This is the largest lending finance initiative focused on the oceans so far. And I'm just going to describe to you a little bit how it's structured. There's really a global fund that directly connects with the investments in the commercial sector that we make on the other side. So on the other side, we have a private equity fund. You know about private equity funds? It's structured pretty much like a standard fund. It's got a target of 500 million, which again would make it the largest stake and targeting a part of the industry that's never been touched by any kind of investing today. The Green Climate Fund has committed to a $125 million junior tranche, meaning that they don't take the first loss of any investment. So the idea there is to catalyze new investments, new investors into the sector because, like I said, historically there's very little, and we want to just get people off the fence. We expect everybody to get their money back and more, but it sometimes takes a little bit of a shove to get investors to buy off a fund for the good economy for the first time. So we invest. We invested. Hello. Sorry, man. Okay. So we invested three sectors that are stressors or solutions for the coastal economy. So we have ocean.
Okay, oh, that's better. So that's an opportunity for a win-win with communities because they make more money, they dramatically reduce pollution into mangroves and coastal habitats, coral reefs, and don't have the impetus to cut down more mangroves. So you have a carbon savings as well as natural buffers for storm surges and so on. Okay, next. Oh, so there are 17 countries eligible to receive the funding right now. I won't list them all for you, but you can see the major fishing nations with big coastlines are in kind of coral color there, in the coral triangle. Philippines, Indonesia, Brazil, Mexico, Colombia. Chile is not highlighted there. Could join. It's not part of it yet. Next slide. And we invest in businesses that either we build from the ground up because they're sustainable solutions. We help grow existing sustainable businesses that have like inherent business models that can benefit nature, or we help transform businesses using our capital and our partnership to more what we might call reef positive and sustainable practices, which generates often business opportunities for them. And the kinds of companies we look for, again, obviously we have to be able to achieve our impact goals, which have to do with repairing and preserving coastal habitats and coral reefs, benefiting local communities, increasing incomes. And again, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to write rather big checks for the sector. So we'll look to deploy up to $75 million in any one investment. So that's not startups and like really small companies. These are kind of companies that are the larger ones in emerging markets in the sector. Usually equity can do some kinds of debt if strategically viable. Next. How are we doing on time? 2 minutes? All right, I'll just wrap up with a few observations just to take it back from all the structuring talk. Things we've learned over the last 5 or 6 years investing on behalf of oceans. First of all, critical that we have visibility to first mile fishers and farmers and communities. If you don't know what they're doing, how they're catching fish, for instance, what bait they're using, what gear they're using, where they're fishing, as a business that's buying that fish, you can't offer real traceability. A pledge that Walmart or McDonald's or Costco has to buy sustainable seafood, they can't really meet it if they don't know what's happening, and most of them don't. And so our job when we get in there in an investment is really map this out and be sure that we have visibility to that first mile, often with using technology to help. Important to engage government. They have to manage the natural resources. They need money usually for that and capacity building. In this example, we helped set up in Indonesia the first what's called a fishery improvement project, meaning you manage a fishery and move it towards MSC certification. The first octopus fishery improvement project in Indonesia and the second on the planet for this species. You need the government to engage. Oceans are a particular part of impact investing where you can't just do what you do. You have to engage all the stakeholders. They all need to change their behavior, because if one fisherman changes his behavior and the neighbor doesn't, it doesn't make any difference. Next. Obviously, all the community members need to benefit. That it has to do with not only fishing or whatever the business is, but also, again, on climate resilience, financial literacy is often important. Emergency preparedness. These are all parts of being.
Estamos preparados ante diferentes emergencias.
My Lord. All right, next.
Siguiente.
And you need obviously to manage, to measure so you can
Necesitamos poder
manage.
gestionar.
All right, thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Okay, I'm going to talk of something different.
Ok, voy a hablar de algo diferente ahora.
Banking. I have no
El tema de
presentation.
los
I just want to tell
bancos.
you about what
Quiero darles
we're doing in Chile, in Banco Estado.
de lo que estamos haciendo en Chile.
Ah, she's translating. Oh. Okay, so I have to speak slow? No. Okay. Yeah. Better. Voy a hablar en español. ¡Qué maravilla! Bueno, les decía que voy a hablar de algo completamente distinta, que es la banca. En particular de la experiencia de Banco Estado en Chile y cómo hemos estado haciendo el proceso de... sí, ya. ¿En español? ¿Prueba en español? Ah, pero eso es muy difícil. Porque vamos a estar hablando las dos en paralelo. Delante aparecía el texto aquí traducido. No lo hago en
I can do it in English.
Okay, so
Ok.
One part of the issue, I was going to say the problem, but it's the issue, is about measuring. Measuring all of you can. First of all, your own emissions, the emissions that we generate as daily works, no? And that is a very big thing for us. It's only, I don't know, 1% of all the issue, because the other 99% are the emissions, the financed emissions. That means emissions that results of our loans, of our investments. So, and that's a very big thing of how to measure big portfolios of loans. It has nothing to do with a mining company or a housing mortgage, things like that. So that's a big issue. But it's very important to measure, because that's the way then you can put the targets, no? So we started with this in 2014. We are also measuring using the Dow Jones Sustainability Index to measure our performance, and we are improving. But as we are committed to Race to Zero and the Banking Alliance for Net Zero, we have to make commitments to 2030 and to 2050. The last one as the arriving to the net zero. In the case of Banco Estado, I want to mention something here. We're a commercial bank, so we do the same things that the other private banks do in Chile. And besides that, as we are a state-owned bank, we have a lot of activities that have to do with our financial services to the government, to the parliament, to the armed forces, to the judiciary. I mean, all what has to do with the state functioning. And municipalities, we work with 75% of municipalities in Chile, and almost the majority of the social organizations, civil organizations. And I mention this because when you want to walk in here in this transition to net zero, I think the first thing to say is that this is not an individual thing. It's impossible to think it about a company alone, a bank alone, a state alone, a municipality alone, or people. This is a path that we have to work all together. Why? Because we have to be sure that everything we do includes everyone and doesn't leave anybody behind, especially most vulnerable population. And I'm going to make an example here. Last week we signed the commitment to reduce or stop deforestation. That's a very big issue for us, and to sign is very easy, no? The thing is how you do it afterwards. And maybe the big companies, we in Chile have very big producers of pulp for paper, very, very big, but those are big companies. They have money, they have resources, they have plans. So even though they maybe are big contributors to the net zero challenge, that's the minor problem in some sense, no? Because in Chile, for example, we have to be careful that in the south part of our country, okay, 80% of the people heat their houses with wood. So and so you can just say, okay, we stop deforesting. You have to look for all the communities and all the parts that uses woods and see how we all together, banks included, municipalities included, social organizations included, and the big companies and the small companies and the users, all together we have to walk this way. That's probably the most important thing that I have learned or realized here, that this is not a path that we can walk alone, but community and cooperation and collaboration is the most important thing. I'm going to leave it here.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to talk today about the economic and ecological significance of natural capital. Next slide. So global warming impacts ecosystems and therefore the natural capital. In fact, we know that global warming is going to harm nature, but nature can also be part of the solution to mitigate climate change. So there is an effect of feedback. Thank you. This is from IPCC report. You can see that we have already 1.1 degrees Celsius warmer. So the temperature are increasing suddenly very quickly. So the message is very clear. We have to reduce our CO2 emissions, and it is time for action. Next slide. Otherwise, you can see already the impact of climate change, like extreme heat, heavy rainfall, drought, fire weather, and the ocean is warming, acidifying and deoxygenating. And you can see here that the future scenarios are not very optimistic. Only the two low CO2 emission scenarios can help us to achieve the Paris Agreement. All the others are not possible. So we have really to reduce our emissions. And here you can see what is already happening. At 1.5 degrees Celsius, you can see the world is already warming. At 2 degrees Celsius, it is much more reddish. And at 4 degrees Celsius, the impact will be really very strong. And it will be very bad for the nature. You can see here the impact on the biodiversity at 1.5 degrees Celsius and at 3 degrees Celsius. And you can see the difference. It's already very clear. It's visual. Next slide. Ecosystem services are impacted. We have 4 categories of ecosystem services: supporting, regulating, provisioning, and cultural and aesthetical ecosystem services. So it is important to protect the nature, and we can call it natural capital in finance, because if we protect the nature
Finanzas.
food production, tourism, and food protection. And as economists, we can evaluate those ecosystem services by the market or on the financial market, for example, for the carbon sequestration services. Next slide, please. This slide is from the last IPBS report.
Try now.
Merci. Okay. Yeah, sorry, this is technology sometimes. Sometimes not. So this slide is from IPBS report on the value of nature. And you can see that there are different ways to give a value to nature. And we should consider all the context when we give the value. Thank you. So usually some people think that we don't have the technology to evaluate nature. This is not true. We know how to evaluate. We have the methodology. The problem is that the value is not taken into decision making. Thank you. And this is why a transformative change is needed to address the global biodiversity crisis. It relies on shifting away from values that overemphasizes short-term and individual material gains to nurturing sustainability-aligned values across society. This is again from from IPCC last report. And we can see that even in the worst scenario, the 815 SPS scenario, you can see that 1/3 of the solution to climate change can come from the nature. It is, of course, on the land, the forest, but also in the ocean, from the coast to the open ocean. Next slide. And finally, in order to conserve natural capital against climate change, prevention is possible by helping nature helping nature to resist these environmental changes, maintaining a genetic diversity and restore certain ecosystems, helping communities to adapt and raising awareness. Thank you for your attention, and you can see we are in the middle, and we can live from nature, with nature, in nature, and as nature. This is also from IPBS report. Thank you.
Okay. Let me pick this up from the point of view of the business community. My name is Fulgus. I run the the World Ocean Council. This is the global business and investment organization. So we bring together the global business community, the investment community around ocean sustainable development. So this session was green finance for sustainability, but we're putting it really in the context of that kind of finance and approach to sustainable finance for a blue planet. And our objective that was defined for us here was talking about moving towards blue-green portfolios that promote sustainable investments to mitigate climate change. So next slide, please. Just to give you a quick bit of context, and I'm going to skip through some of the slides quickly to keep in time here. For those of you that aren't familiar with the size and diversity of the ocean economy, it is enormous, with the often quoted point here that the ocean is as big as the 8th largest national economy. And so you can see the numbers here in terms of the overall picture of ecosystem goods and services at 24 trillion, and some of the national level values that are emerging as the ocean economy is more understood. I'd really like to emphasize with you, though, that what makes up this economy, and this is what we focus on in the World Ocean Council, it's a very diverse set of economic players. Some of them are obvious to us: shipping, fishing, aquaculture, offshore energy. Others maybe we don't think of so much right away as recreational boating, desalination, and others. But an important point here is all of this use of the ocean is growing and expanding geographically, intensity, duration, the diversity of kinds of use of the ocean and its space and resources. This creates a fundamental challenge. So the ocean is the second biggest global commons we have, the atmosphere being the first, the ocean the second. And so all of these different sectors and industries and the individual companies that make up them, there's a challenge for them to be leaders in sustainability, because they cannot, like with the atmosphere, like with the climate, one company and even one entire sector is not going to be able to ensure we've got a healthy and productive ocean. The best efforts by a single company or an entire sector is not going to be enough. We need a lot of companies from a lot of sectors working together, and that's led to this fundamental to create the interaction, the collaboration amongst companies and sectors. Next slide. So just very briefly here, that's what we do at the World Ocean Council. We're the only global business organization focused on ocean sustainability and bringing together all of those different sectors. And we have a large and growing network of some 35,000 stakeholders from the industry, investment, and innovation communities to create that interaction, that leadership that can emerge and needs to emerge to deal with the ocean challenges and the ocean climate challenges, which is what I'd like to focus on here. A big part of that effort is on finance, bringing the finance community together. We just had, and Dale was there, we just had the first ever Global Blue Finance Summit 3 weeks ago in Barcelona. So we bring together that ocean investment community, and we link them with, we're helping to inform and raise awareness in the investment community, the finance community, of what are the real issues affecting the ocean, what are the sustainability challenges, and bring that to the attention of the investment community in terms of what is the market for addressing those challenges. And that's the industry. That's our core strength here, is knowing the companies, the industries, and the issues and the drivers for change. So regulatory issues, public pressure, etc. And also bringing in the innovation community, where a lot of the solutions come from, as well as a lot of the investment opportunities. And so we're here today talking about green finance, and this is the blue finance face of green and sustainable finance. And so we do that in a variety of ways, through an investor roundtable that's been convening every month, through a focus on creating metrics and indicators for ESG, ocean ESG investing, and bringing together the innovation initiatives, the accelerators and incubators from around the world to create that level of coordination and engagement with the investment community and the ocean industries. And so what I'd really like to focus on are the key issues here. This in the next slide indicate the kinds of issues that need attention from the finance community. These are some of the key ones in terms of environmental impacts and resource use and conservation. Next slide. But a lot of those issues are climate related. And so this is what I'd like to bring more attention to here, because we are, of course, the COP and the role of the ocean climate biodiversity nexus, which in fact was the theme for our Sustainable Ocean Summit 3 weeks ago in Barcelona. So let me go next slide here just to identify identify a couple of the or three of the key investment opportunities with ocean industries, with the ocean business community that deal with climate crisis. So investing in ocean solutions for the climate crisis, blue carbon and ocean carbon removal, infrastructure adaptation in ports and coastal areas, and offshore renewable energy. And so just to give you a bit more detail there, and then we'll go through this fairly quickly, that the carbon sequestration side, so blue carbon, maybe many of you have heard of, the coastal ecosystems, mangroves, seagrass beds, etc., enormous potential to to sequester carbon, much more than terrestrial soils and forests, but even greater than that, and the single greatest carbon sequestration potential we have on the planet is in the ocean ecosystems. And I'll show you a few numbers in a minute. We focus on the business of ocean carbon sequestration. The companies that are moving this forward, enhancing ocean and coastal ecosystem potential to harvest, to sequester carbon, and the investor, engaging the investors in that situation. Next slide. And we won't go into this in detail, but this describes the process whereby for blue carbon, the coastal ecosystems, how they sequester carbon. And next slide. Just to give you a sense of the numbers. We're talking about tens of millions of tons of carbon that can be sequestered each year by seagrass beds, tidal marshes, by mangrove forests. And this is a rapidly growing area for creating carbon sequestration and carbon credits, even more nascent, even more early stage, but much, much more important in addition. And this is not either or. This is in addition to terrestrial efforts, in addition to this coastal blue carbon, is the ocean carbon. Next slide. Opportunities, a variety of ways in which the ocean can be, ocean systems can be enhanced. These are nature-based solutions for which there are ways, technologies, approaches to enhance them. The main ones are listed there. Happy to talk more with anyone who's interested in this. The next slide is really a key take-home message here. Look at the amounts. This is what the ocean can do for us. It's already sequestered, taken 25% of the carbon out of the atmosphere during the industrial age. We would all be in a lot of trouble if it wasn't for the ocean already. This is what the ocean has the potential to do for us and our climate problem by sequestering carbon. So these different techniques, these methodologies you see on the one side, nutrient fertilization, seaweed cultivation, etc., those are the techniques. Businesses are now emerging that are applying these techniques, these methodologies. They're in very early stage. This is an enormous, probably some people have characterized this as the biggest climate investment opportunity in front of us in terms of nature-based systems. And we need to work with these companies, and that's what we do. We bring them together. We're creating the potential for them to learn from each other, to engage with investors, and really develop this potential. So that's the key part of what we do at the World Ocean Council in terms of the climate crisis. You can go ahead. Next slide. The supply side, working with those companies. The demand side, getting the buyers interested and informed about the ocean carbon sequestration results, the carbon credits that can emerge, particularly the ocean industries, to connect them with the ocean sources of carbon credits, and developing the monitoring, reporting, and verification systems that are essential to making this all happen. So that's the first big one, and I'll just very quickly talk about these two other areas: port and coastal infrastructure adaptation. The global economy that I illustrated earlier, the global ocean economy, depends on this port and coastal infrastructure, as well as many other industries, tourism and many coastal communities, etc. Next slide. But this is what it looks like when we have the kinds of extreme weather events coupled now with sea level rise. This is what our coastal infrastructure that we depend on, and so many industries, so many communities, and so many depend on what happens. Again, an investment opportunity here. Next slide. In terms of ocean investment, blue investment, we need to work with the users of those industries, of that infrastructure, the ports, the shipping, tourism, coastal tourism, coastal transport, etc., and undertake this kind of process that you see listed here to develop the infrastructure that will be resilient and adapt to the impacts of climate change. Next slide. And to do this in a way that's what we call gray, green, blue. Gray infrastructure, the hard-built infrastructure of ports and roads and airports, breakwaters. The green infrastructure, the nature-based solutions, such as the mangroves, the coral reefs, the seagrass beds. And some of those have a blue dividend, as we've talked about, the blue carbon potential. So maintaining and restoring those ecosystems and the investment opportunities around all this is enormous. Next slide. Lastly, I'll mention, just with 2 slides and then I'll stop, this third category of the role that the ocean and coastal areas can play in addressing our climate crisis through providing renewable energy. You can see here the growth in offshore wind. Most of you have heard of this, and it's going to grow even greater in the years to come as it moves further offshore. You see in that diagram, the floating offshore wind turbine is going to take wind offshore into countries and areas where it's not been able to be moving very rapidly until just in the last few years. Japan, the state of California, Taiwan, Korea, many parts of the world need floating turbines in order to capture the wind potential that they've got. And lastly, I'll mention on the next slide, offshore ocean energy, wave energy, tidal energy, current energy. Look at the terawatt hours that potential that is there. Investment in these technologies, this potential here from ocean energy would basically create all of the electricity we need on the planet right now if we could figure out how to harness it. So the technology, the R&D, the prototyping, huge investment needs and opportunities here so that the ocean can help us solve our climate crisis. So I'll stop there with that business and investment perspective on finance for the ocean. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Ajadi, your turn, please.
Thank you very much for inviting me. I would like to start with just mentioning that I am a professor of international financial systems in the City University of London. And I'm also a founder of the Euro-Mediterranean Economist Association. We have developed a model, economic model, which is tweaked into what I call before it was the extractive economic model, and we tweaked this model, adding 4 principles that are transparency, responsibility, inclusiveness, and sustainability. Why I'm saying this? Because first of all, our economic models have been for years embedded, anchored in what I call the extractive type of resources, which are practically looking at the nature just to extract. It's an extractive model. This model is not functional anymore, and of course, all our economies and financial systems have been anchored and developed based on that, I would call, reference that we have started for many years. So now what we are trying to do is really move in parallel from an extractive model, which we're calling this transition. We are still transiting from fossil fuel type into sustainable, new renewables, for example, using the nature for giving us solution. We have taken the nature for granted. We've never seen that the nature and nature-based solutions have been there, but we have not observed this for years because we were completely focused on what I call the easy resources just to extract from the soil and develop our economic models. But the problem is of this is what? The finance has followed this model. So in fact, finance, banking, insurance, investment funds, they have been investing for return and for getting the money back that they have invested. So they are intermediators between savers and investors. So the problem here is to move fast is very difficult because that's why the transition cost is very, very time consuming. So it means that if you go too fast, you create financial stability problems for the systems who are not prepared to move fast. Now, if you go very slowly, then the climatic challenges that we are living, they are becoming climatic crises. Crisis with ES, not one crisis, because there are several crises that is in front of us. So the problem here is, in finance, we always work on normally distributed functions to be able to measure the risk. When we talk about climatic risk and climatic crisis, the distribution of risk is not anymore normal, it becomes tail. But the problem is the tail risk models are becoming normal, so we have to treat them as normal and frequent type of events. And this is also very complex in finance, so nobody wants to change from a system that has worked for what I call stable extractive models, what we thought before, many years ago, decades ago, and that has given the global economy, in fact, high growth rates. Now we are in what I call uncertainties. So uncertainties in terms of science, because we still have to learn a lot about nature-based, science-based solutions. Of course, these science-based solutions, and I'm also an economist, so when we develop models, we need to test these models for a long time to be able to say this model is sound, that can be used. And this is the problem we have nowadays. All these methods are great, they're innovative, and they are pillars for what I call a transformative scenario that is anchored in my view, sustainability, inclusiveness, responsibility, because our decisions and our innovations will have to be also, they have to be responsible. Means we cannot just innovate, for example, to kill people. We have to innovate to really create jobs, to create positive value. And then transparency. Transparency to understand what are the companies. So you mentioned the companies. We need to know these companies, what they do in terms of their balance sheet, how they allocate their money into sustainability, into new mechanisms, what you have heard, what you have mentioned, the blue carbons. It's very exciting, the blue carbons, from a science-based point of view. Actually, today we had an event where the Prime Minister of Bahamas explained the blue carbon technology that they have and how they are trying to use it as a new asset for swapping their own debt. And this is a great, very exciting method especially for low and middle income countries that are overly indebted because of the old, what I call old, still current extractive economic model. So in reality, we can see that those innovations, they can be propellers for a transformative economic model where finance is the last part of the game. As soon as they find that there is stability, soundness of the concepts, of the measurements, it's very easy for them to adapt. But the transition risk nowadays is so high, and somebody has to pay for it. Who is going to pay for it? The private sector may not pay for it because they are sticky in the sense that they have to take their time to move. Although we could see some serious commitment from the financial sector, also from the regulatory authority, because they are also pushing the financial sector in terms of, for example, ESG disclosure of matrix, also imposing in a certain way what I call the green asset ratio. Green asset ratio means you need to show how green is your balance sheet. And 3, some prudential treatment of environmental risk. And this is also important. You have to set up a certain number or capital to ensure that your risk of transition is dealt with. So all these matters for me is going at the same time. So increasing what I call the uncertainties, while the climatic change is becoming climatic crisis, especially for certain countries that may not be prepared for it. Now, the problem here is if you don't have this innovative mechanism very fast, they may find themselves in a situation where they are over-indebted, and the financial sector may not be able even to help them, because at the end of the day, they plug off liquidity from them, and they will not be able to finance their transition or finance their adaptation or mitigation plans in the 2030, 2050. So again, private-public partnership here is essential. Role of burden sharing for the future is very important as well. So solutions you made, Paul, is very important because, for example, infrastructure for adaptations in oceans, for example. This is something that can be easily done because you can transit. You have banks and insurance companies and guarantee institutions that can go with it. For example, you mentioned technology. Technology is not only about technology that is developed in one country, but shared with other countries so we can go faster. I understand that we have the requirements for shareholder value creation. So whoever owns the technology wants to own the rewards on the technology. But nowadays, the problems are bigger, global, and we need to really share, even on the profit side. And this is the way forward. Now, you mentioned this blue carbon, green, all this certification, also the carbon sequestration on the green side or the blue side. This is fantastic opportunity. But then it should not be seen as an offsetting mechanism just to, at the same time, pollute and at the same time offset. So it needs to be really disentangled from this dynamic to allow also that innovation continues, initiative continues. So then the financial sector comes after, because at the end of the day, the financial sector, they will have to have rewards and they need to have returns and risks and returns. They need to manage a risk, and we need to have matrix to manage these new climatic risks that are in Europe. Europe is very advanced for it already. They have been committing since the Glasgow COP, and they are continuing to commit. And I'm actually acting as the chair of the advisory board of the European Banking Authority, and this is what we are talking every day in terms of standard. So the policy, the rules are applied into standards for the banking sector, them fast into and of course there is a cost for it. It's called the trade-off between stability and sustainability, and we need to play very this trade. In Europe, that have been working on this, and they are leading the way into decarbonization model, net zero. These are prepared. They are much more prepared. Why? Because, in fact, they are also trying to move from the dependence of fossil fuels. So there is incentive for it. Other countries, especially producers of fossil fuel, and then most probably they have less incentives for them selling fossil fuels. Also for livelihood, they have to live with it. So the challenges are huge, and again, the financial sector is committed for sure. I mean, there is commitment. I feel the commitment. I'm an academic. I'm only an observer, but I see pockets of commitment, particularly in the part of the world that is really prepared for it, so they can lead the way into the transformative scenario of sustainability. But then other countries, they are not there yet. And this is why innovative solutions, the help, for example, of your council, International Council of Ocean, and then having, for example, countries in the Mediterranean, in Africa, part of it is very essential. So then we can move much faster than anticipated. But again, I believe that financial sector is there if there is a great opportunity, great opportunities in terms of financing. Also, they know how to manage the risk. They have also the requirements or regulatory requirements, supervisory requirements that oblige them to stay sound and resilient to any external shocks. Now external shocks from climatic challenges are going to be much more frequent, and of course the countries, they have to be prepared much faster. But again, for lower and middle income countries, I believe that part of the solution is burden sharing at a global level. We have made the proposal, if you allow me 1 minute to share it with you, is to develop what we call at a global level, which will allow countries to adapt or So, ¿aló?
Entonces,
Un,
ok,
dos,
¿me
tres.
escuchan? Bien.
Esto, sí. So the solution here is a blended financing mechanism at a global level where developed countries, they allocate some of the SDRs to other countries in low middle income, and then they allow the possibility also for these low middle income countries to issue long-term bonds up to years. For example, imagine they need infrastructure. It's very specific, and then at the same time, lower cost in terms of the yield that is promised to the investors. Most probably, the yields that are promised to the investors will accept a lower yield at a longer, period of time, but at the same time, the countries who are issuing that bond, I call it S bond or sustainability, whatever you want to call it, or adaptation bond, they are committing fully to debt transparency. So this is very important. So we know where the money is going, but it's not one institution that knows, but then also the citizens, because there must be public accountability to the citizens. And this is what is the problem. Finance. Finance needs transparency to be able to reduce the cost of funding. Countries in lower middle income countries, transparency is lower, corruption is higher. So this is a problem. So that's why the rates that are applied in the finance is higher, because there is mismanagement too. So all of this allows what a possibility for all countries of the world to develop technology, develop infrastructure, and develop new innovative financing models like this blue carbon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tim, I would like to give the word to the audience if you have any questions.
Thank you, Agustina. Natalie, I have a question for you. You were mentioning the need of the government to take the first step in some sense. And we know that if it's not rentable, eventually industry will never change their behavior. And according to you, do you have concrete example of how different governments can really move the line in order to evaluate marine or land ecosystem services, or in order to regulate in terms of force industry to incorporate new behavior in order to reduce the offset and mitigate?
Thank you for the question. All the governments, like the private sector, they are committed to be net zero by 2050. So I think that government now need to take action, and the private sector is already trying, but they look more on their rentability. But the government can take the lead. The problem is that most government chiefs are looking only at their next election. So they look at the short term, and here we have a more longer term vision that is needed. But in fact, everybody should do something. Of course, the international organizations, the governments, but also the private sector and the civil society, they all can think about the protection of the ecosystems, of the nature. And the notion of blue carbon is here very important, because we know that blue carbon is a sequestration of the CO2 by the nature, and so the government can protect their nature and maybe not sell the land to different industries, or for example for coral reefs, if you want to protect your coral reefs, maybe you shouldn't sell the coast to the resorts, and this is against the protection. And maybe here for coral reefs we can also consider insurance, and if the resorts are supposed to insure the coral reefs, they can be interested to protect them too.
Last question from the audience, in case you have. Otherwise, you're very participate today.
Yes, and I was thinking that it's true what you mentioned, and I have a question for Dale. Unfortunately, he left but maybe you can answer this question. I know that the coral reef found is one of the biggest ones actually, and it's a great thing. But at the end of the day, the first floor was 100 million, and hello, yeah, and $100 million is still a few. I mean, interest are around 2%, so it means $2 million a year. You cannot with that. So somewhere it happened that the private sector just don't react. And even you were mentioning to change the behavior in terms of preserve the coast, what it should be the rational behavior. But at the end, it means another way to change the economical force from an industry to another one, means to change it from the touristic industry probably to the insurance one, or to new industry. And meanwhile, if we don't have new industry appearing with some kind of rentability because of a conservationist behavior, it will never happen. So I would like to have your feedback about this.
Again, you can also answer this one.
Yes, we know that coral reefs provide $36 billion per year. So now countries can think about coral reefs not only about like an ecosystem which is just beautiful, but also something that can bring money. And we really need to transform our economy from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy, like also Rim and Paul mentioned. And this is how I think we can solve maybe the problem and protect our nature to protect our climate.
Would you like to make some final remarks?
I would just add to this last bit of discussion that creating the economic opportunities around all of this is really essential, so that where finance can play a role to be a positive driver for the change, the transition. That's, we need to harness that to the extent possible, but that needs to really be based on then the innovation, the specific industry and company opportunities. That's what the investment is able to drive forward, and this links very much to the local communities in terms of jobs, in terms of the use of ecosystem goods and services where possible. And so connecting those pieces is part of this transition to a less extractive and more regenerative economy. All of those pieces need to come into play to make that possible. And I'd also add that regeneration itself is a business opportunity. We had an excellent session at our Sustainable Ocean Summit 3 weeks ago in Barcelona on the business of ocean regeneration. And there are more and more companies emerging that focus on corals, on other kinds of coastal ecosystems that are doing the business of regeneration. And that's going to be another important part of making this transition.
Okay.
Last comment in line with this, in the transition, we avoid as much as possible. First of all, to identify greenwashing, and second, to avoid it as much as possible. So then it does not contaminate the good innovative setting models and mechanisms that have innovative value and that have a potential to be upscaled. Because you see, when we enter into the greenwashing or offsetting for greenwashing, then the innovative potential will be reduced, and then this could reduce the speed of the transition. So it depends in reality on the incentives that are in this new transformative scenario. I assume that oceans, lands, everything that is linked to nature has the potential to be regenerative. Even ourselves as humans and our planetary species have the capacity from our health perspective and so on. So really, if we move our incentive system toward more sustainability, more sharing economy, more long-term values, whatever it means, because we are not eternal. So this regenerative value could be identified for all species, for the land, for all the ecosystems, and we are able to generate value, economic value from it, and then we completely change the model from what I call an extreme model that is only looking at making money into making value from the regeneration of our systems. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for staying until the end. It's been a pleasure to listen to you all, and thank you for the audience for being here.